Good afternoon, everybody. The subcommittee will come to order. I want to thank you all for being here with us today for the hearing entitled Hiring and Retaining Veterans for the Modern Day Workforce. But before I give any formal introductory remarks, I'd like to ask my friend from Texas to introduce his special guest. And you can imagine who they might be. They're the cutest of people in this room. So, and you know, Takano. Mr. O'Rourke, please introduce your special guest, and then I'll say a few words about Takano.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In exchange for this privilege, I'll waive my opening comments. But my son Ulysses, who's 11, and his brother Henry, who's 7, and his sister Molly, who just turned 10, are with us on a visit to the Capitol. They're first in a long time. You guys want to stand up so everyone can see who you are? And so anyhow, very lucky that they're here with us. And thanks for introducing them. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks to our panelists. Looking forward to your testimony and having a very productive conversation today. Grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Y'all aren't nearly as cool as those kids, but I'll try to do my best when we introduce you. But we are honored that you're here. This is and what you've done to support our veterans, and the recruiting and the hiring and the retaining of these heroes, and giving sort of special consideration to their to the assets that they are, but also to the unique challenges of serving this country in the armed services and coming back as a civilian. And I think they're an incredible asset if we're intentional about it. And companies like the ones you represent have been intentional, and we want to understand what you're doing and how it's going and why it's working. And we want to increase the things that you're doing exponentially. We want to highlight them and brag on them, and we want others to follow your lead. But you know, we have an economy, and I don't want to be partisan about it, but I think the pro-growth policies that we've put in place we're starting to see some growth, and I think to have millions of surplus jobs and low unemployment rates is great for everybody, not just our veterans. But certainly this is a season that is welcomed in the life of this country and this country's economy. And we've got a lot of returning servicemen and women who are transitioning as veterans, again, who have some unique skills and unique experiences. We need to work, and we are, on a program called the Transition Assistance Program. Hope to get your thoughts on that today, but so that we could improve that process by which we engage our active duty men and women before they leave and assess their health and challenges and their skills and the gaps on the education and workforce training, and make sure we empower and equip them to maximize their full potential as civilians. And so we, again, are appreciative of what you're doing for our veterans, and we're anxious to jump right in to hear from you all. And that's why I'm going to part from my traditional sort of formal introductory remarks. Beto, why don't you say a word or two just about them being here? I know you said you'd waive it, but say a couple words to these guys.
Again, I'm grateful for what you do. I know in the case of Prudential and other large employers in El Paso, you haven't waited for the government to give direction. You've taken the lead yourselves in making sure that transition is a successful one. And one of the things that I love about the approach that each of you represent to meeting this opportunity with our veterans is that they represent this opportunity, given their experience, their expertise, their service, to do something phenomenal for your organizations or the organizations that you represent, for the communities in which they live, and for our country. And so often we talk here about our failure to meet the challenge for health care or housing or the post 9/11 GI Bill. And where there are deficiencies, we've got to ensure that we are responsive to that. But I love the idea behind today's hearing, which is how do we make the most out of what those veterans are ready to give back. And so for all those who are here today, for Prudential, for your work in El Paso, we are really grateful for the lead that you've already taken. Looking forward to any direction you can give us, any guidance that we can follow and implement in that transition assistance program that the chairman's been working on, or anything else that we can do in our capacity as members of Congress. So thank you for being here. Looking forward to the conversation. And Mr. Chairman, again, thanks for pulling this together.
You bet. Well said. Now let's recognize our panel. With us today, we have Ms. Elizabeth O'Brien, Senior Director of Military Spouse Programs for Hiring Our Heroes at the United States Chamber of Commerce. Glad that you're here with us. Brigadier General Gary M. Proffitt, Senior Director for Military Programs at Walmart. Mr. Matt Kress, Manager for Veterans and Military Affairs at Starbucks. Mr. Charles Savola, Vice President and Head of Veterans Initiatives at Prudential Financial. And Robert Dowett, the Senior Director of America's Customer Solutions Center at Dell. Again, thank you guys for being here with us. We'll now recognize each of you for 5 minutes for your opening statement. And Ms. O'Brien, we'll start with you from the Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon, Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I am Elizabeth O'Brien, our Senior Director of Military Spouse Programs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Hiring Our Heroes. I am a military spouse of 12 years and at one point sustained 6 moves in 8 years. So our background on employment is vast and knowledgeable. Hiring Our Heroes was founded in 2011 as a nationwide initiative of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation in response to the crisis situation facing our veteran population struggling to find employment opportunities. Hiring Our Heroes assists military veterans, transitioning service members, and military spouses in finding meaningful employment opportunities in a 21st century workforce. Our program accomplishes this goal in a myriad of ways, including hiring fairs, on-installation transition summits, career development and networking events, focused research, best practice development, and communication campaigns in partnership with many of our sponsorship companies here today. To date, we have hosted over 1,100 hiring events around the United States of America and on U.S. military installations around the world. Incredible transformation has occurred in the space of military hiring since 2011. Currently, our veteran unemployment is at 3.7%. And as the employment landscape for veterans and military spouses has changed, we have evolved our operations. Why? We have to remain effective in serving our veteran and military families. We're looking to connect them with not just a job, but the right job. Innovative programming has allowed us to move left of transition. It's a process, one that requires preparation. Over the last 2 years, our summits have doubled at military installations around the country and around the world. We've expanded to dozens of new installations, and this year we were able to host our first transition summits on Coast Guard bases, having the opportunity to serve a population we had not been engaged with before. One of the most innovative programs that we have created is our corporate fellowship program, which we stood up in 2015. Developed under the guidelines of the Department of Defense's SkillBridge Job Training Initiative, it is a 12-week fellowship program. We take active duty service members in their last 90 days of transition, place them with corporate partners around the country, and in often cases, leveraging the permissive TDY option through the Army. So we can take a fellow or service member from Hawaii and they want to retire to Atlanta and place them with a company in Atlanta. To date, 13 locations in the United States, 1,000 fellows have graduated. We have a 90% job offer rate. 180 companies have hosted fellows with a starting salary of $88,000. The success of the program has led to the development of pilot programs for veterans and military spouses with the Military Corps Career Connect. But we as a country have to understand that veterans are part of a military family. We have to understand the needs of 21st century military families. We have over 700,000 active duty military spouses around the world. 92% of them are female. This does not include our veteran spouses that have returned home to many of your communities away from military installations. We define a military spouse as any individual who identifies as having their career impacted by a military member's service to the nation. Our military spouses are unemployed at a rate of 4 times the national average of their civilian counterparts. 4 times the national average. We want and need opportunities to have dual income households, as is the norm for married Americans across the country with children, over 60%. We are not at that rate. 71% of employed military spouses agree that having 2 incomes is vitally important to their family, and yet we stand to lose over $12,000 a year in income for spouses that do work, and over a course of a 20-year military career, over $189,000 in lost wages. We are younger and more highly educated than the average American adult of working age. The lack of employment opportunities creates stress and influences a military family's desire and want to stay in our all-volunteer force. Our program has responded appropriately. We have launched and created over 50 networks around the world to serve military spouses as our Military Spouse Professional Network with 15,000 members. We've created economic empowerment zones, grassroots localized efforts that create connections and collaboration between regional and national employers, launching in San Antonio, Tampa, Colorado, and the great state of Washington with another 6 rollouts anticipated by the end of the year. On Thursday, we will host our Military Spouse Employment Summit at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, where we will address many of these issues and launch part 2 of our study. In conclusion, we are proud at hiring our heroes to serve our veterans, service members, and a wide array of private and public sector members. We are committed to the mission of connecting veterans and military spouses around the world, and we will continue to unite our partners across the nation in our common mission as we work together to continue to achieve fundamental change. And I call upon everybody in this room to help us get military spouses out of the fine print as we move forward across this country to serve our families. Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and members of the subcommittee, I thank you again for the opportunity to testify and look forward to answering your questions.
My only question is, I thought that the great state was reserved for only one state, Mr. I'll reserve.
It appears everywhere we go, everybody is the great state.
You got to be proud of your state. Ms. O'Brien, thanks for your comments. General Prophet, we recognize you now for 5 minutes.
Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and members of the House Veteran Affairs Subcommittee and Economic Opportunity. On behalf of Walmart Incorporated, I want to thank you for the opportunity to rejoin you today to talk about hiring and retaining veterans for the modern-day workforce. I had the privilege of testifying before the full committee in 2014, and as I stated then, I am grateful for your leadership and partnership in honoring our nation's veterans' service and sacrifice, and for all you do to aid in their transition to civilian life. Walmart has a rich history with veterans who serve, those who serve on active duty and in the Reserve and the Guard, and veteran and military families. Arguably, it began with Captain U.S. Army Sam Walton, who founded Walmart over 50 years ago. His legacy has been enriched by countless veteran associates over the years and has recently been enhanced by our Veterans Welcome Home commitment, established in 2013 and expanded in 2015 when we pledged to hire 250,000 veterans by 2020. I'm proud to say that since 2013, we have added more than 200,000 veterans to our workforce and promoted more than 28,000 to roles with higher pay and greater responsibility. When we announced our commitment in 2013, our goal was to put returning post-9/11 U.S. veterans back to work. At that time, their rate of unemployment was disturbingly high. Now, it is the lowest it has been in decades, and we'd like to think we've played a small part in helping bring that number down. Rather than taking a victory lap, however, we must remain vigilant and know that more work remains. Through my interactions with veterans over the years, I've learned that we have a much better chance of retaining our veteran hires if they have an understanding of the company's mission, if they're able to make a positive impact to their team or business quickly, and if they feel supported. Furthermore, we found that a clear vision of a new veteran associate's career path within the organization is one of the more crucial pieces to veteran recruitment and retention. To realize those ends, our recruiting and hiring process combines technology and personal consultation to achieve scale without sacrificing the human touch. And perhaps one of our most successful practices is our approach to onboarding, where we place new hires with seasoned associates who are veterans, military spouses, currently serving members of the Guard and Reserve, or associates who just have an affinity for those who have served. In a world in which new skills are required to meet the rapidly changing demands of our customers, Walmart is investing in training and talent development for our frontline associates aimed at building foundational and advanced skills through our Pathways program and academies. An additional business initiative that I feel holds tremendous value is our Military Family Promise. It guarantees a job at a nearby store or club for all military personnel and military spouses employed by the company who move to a different part of the country because they or their spouse have been transferred by the U.S. military. The Military Family Promise allows military spouses in particular to remain in the same personnel and pay systems and turn jobs into careers. Outside of what we do for our associates, Walmart actively seeks products from veteran-owned businesses to add to our stores and online assortment. 2 weeks ago, we held our 5th annual open call where we invited suppliers to our home office to pitch products made in the U.S. Out of more than 450 companies that attended, 22 self-identified as veteran-owned businesses. And as a founding member of the Coalition of Veteran-Owned Business, Walmart is committed to help grow and support veteran-owned businesses and communities throughout the U.S. In 2011, the Walmart and the Walmart Foundation committed $20 million through 2015 to support veterans and their families with assistance programs that provide job training, transition help, and education. With the early completion of the commitment in May of 2014, Walmart and the Walmart Foundation renewed the commitment, announcing an additional $20 million through 2019. We are supporting many organizations doing great work through these commitments, and I'd like to call out just 3 of them. The Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University, the Henry M. Jackson Foundation, and as the number of women joining our U.S. Armed Forces and the number of female veterans reintegrating into civilian life have grown, Boston University School of Medicine's Women Veterans Network. As we look to the future, we see great potential to address the remaining barriers to successful transition from military service to civilian life, but only through collaboration and a shared vision will we realize it. Our goal is to synchronize efforts and empower every veteran and his or her family to lead a full and meaningful life by achieving optimal health and well-being, leveraging education and workforce readiness, and fostering employment and entrepreneurship opportunities. With clearer data, a unified vision, and a leading strategy, we can better serve our veterans and their families, enhance our national security by contributing to the preservation of the all-volunteer force, ensure our global competitiveness and civic leadership, bring our military, veteran, and civilian populations closer together, and meet our moral and social obligations to our veterans. We salute America's heroes. We're honored to have the opportunity to employ them, to learn from them, and to support them and their families in every way we can. Thanks again to the subcommittee for its leadership and partnership and for holding this hearing. I appreciate the invitation to appear and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General. Now, Mr. Kress, we recognize you for 5 minutes, representing Starbucks.
Good afternoon, Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and members of the subcommittee. As a post-9/11 combat veteran, it is an honor to share with you how Starbucks Coffee Company is continuing to support active duty military spouses, and veterans as they transition into Starbucks partners, as we refer to our employees. To give some personal context to my remarks, I spent 22 years in the Marine Corps between active and reserve service as both a commissioned officer and enlisted Marine. After deploying to Iraq in 2004 with Marine Corps Special Operations Command, I left active duty to become a firefighter in Southern California. During my time in public safety, I took advantage of the post-9/11 GI Bill to earn a master's degree in an MBA, which took me to Starbucks. In November 2013, Starbucks made a groundbreaking commitment to hire at least 10,000 veterans and military spouses in 5 years. I'm proud to say that we achieved that goal early, and in March 2017 set a new goal of hiring 25,000 by 2025, which we are quickly working towards. Throughout this process, we have recognized that serving our veterans and military spouses is about much more than simply providing jobs. Starbucks understands that the unique skills, experiences, and knowledge that they bring through their service are tremendously valuable. Our goal, therefore, is not only to hire 25,000, but also to create a work environment and corporate culture that fosters their personal and professional growth. A steady paycheck is important when shifting jobs, but veterans and their families are not just shifting jobs when they leave the service. They're leaving an environment where they had a clear sense of purpose and worked closely with others towards goals that were much bigger than themselves. I'm proud to say that Starbucks provides that environment. Moving to the topic of innovations, one of our early recognitions was the need to evaluate this population through a different lens, based on their training and life experience. To this end, we shifted from a skills-based hiring model to a competency model when evaluating job candidates. While the job-specific training received in the military might not be a direct match for our environment, we know that the leadership, teamwork, and other intangible skills are a great fit for Starbucks. We also know that the enthusiasm and dedication that military spouses bring to our stores creates a welcoming environment for our customers. Parallel to this, Starbucks has focused on preparing our field leaders to effectively lead veterans and military spouses through an understanding of their unique differences in culture, leadership expectations, and even language. One of the best ways we have found to achieve this are through immersions on military bases where our field leaders and partners get to see firsthand the natural teamwork that translates so well to our stores. We have also listened to our partners and developed or improved several programs or policies that are unique to our veteran and military populations. For current reservists, we provide 80 hours of flexible leave to facilitate military participation. If Guard or Reserve partners are called to active duty, we pay the difference between their Starbucks and military wages for up to 78 weeks. Finally, our veterans partners can now gift their College Achievement Plan, which is a fully funded remote bachelor's degree at Arizona State University, to their spouse or child. We also recognize the need to build an internal veteran cultural competency that not only understands and values veterans, but is improved by infusing their values into the company's culture. For Starbucks, this started with the recognition that much of what has made the company incredibly successful parallels military values. A commitment to excellence, strong sense of ethical and moral principles, camaraderie, and empowerment of our partners are among the values that make Starbucks a special place to work and parallels what drives our military. Another internal cultural piece is the growth of our veteran affinity group, the Armed Forces Network, which has 16 chapters throughout the country. The AFN provides a source of mentorship, camaraderie, and connection for our veterans and spouses. It also provides a forum and focal point for building our military cultural competency. In return, our veteran partners pay it forward by engaging in community volunteer activities and represent the best of Starbucks. Continuing on the broader question on innovations in the space, we're currently focused on meeting the employment challenges faced by military spouses. With an unemployment rate that is 4 times the veteran population, we are partnering with Hiring Our Heroes, USAA, MOAA, and others to find lasting solutions. On our side, we have specifically designed processes that assist our military spouses to transfer their jobs to new Starbucks locations when the inevitable change of duty station orders arrive. We also have flexible leave policies for spouses that take into account the realities of deployments, moving, and homecoming. Starbucks is increasing the opportunities for local communities to use our stores to engage with military members and their families, expand partnerships with veteran service organizations to relevant programming, and using our scale to create connections to bridge the military-civilian divide. Utilizing our 44 military family stores, which are situated in communities near military installations, we are working with a range of our partners such as the USO, Blue Star Families, and Team RWB to provide needed transition programming and services. Our stores are also a hub for organizing partner-driven community service projects in conjunction with the veterans groups, The Mission Continues, and Team Rubicon. These organizations provide veterans and spouses with opportunities to make connections in their new communities, as well as leverage their considerable skills for the greater good. Moving forward, our ambition is to change what it means to support the troops. While being thanked for their service is appreciated, military members and their spouses want to be given the opportunity to demonstrate their incredible leadership, experience, and talent that they bring to the workplace. We will continue driving and refining this effort through our policy storytelling and partnerships. As our dedicated hiring program and veteran cultural competency matures, we are increasingly sharing our models and lessons learned with others. In closing my remarks, I would like to raise opportunities for Congress to enable the success of our veterans and military spouses. First is recognizing and supporting the unique employment challenges of our military spouses. A second request is related to your 2018 Mulder Transition Improvement Act, Mr. Chairman. Given the transition process, greater structure and adding counseling and wraparound services are truly important changes that will increase the value and impact. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. After serving our country, it is my honor to discuss the Starbucks Veterans and Military Spouses Program and the difference it is making in the lives of our military members and their families.
Thank you, Mr. Kress. We now recognize Mr. Savola from Prudential for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and members of the House Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity. My name is Chuck Savola. I'm an Army veteran, and I head Prudential's Office of Veterans Initiatives. Thank you for having me here today and the opportunity to speak with you about Prudential's veterans programs. The mission statement of our Veterans Initiative Office is to establish sustainable programs and activities that have a positive impact on the lives of veterans and their families, helping them to achieve professional success, financial prosperity, and peace of mind. Our dedicated Office of Veterans Initiatives was formed in 2010 at the direction of our chairman, John Strangfeld. Prudential strives to be a preferred employer for veterans and military spouses, a community leader in supporting veteran service organizations, and a national leader in developing and sharing best practices for corporate veteran programs. We have established a 5-pillar strategy to achieve our goals. The first pillar, and our primary focus, is education and employment. This covers our programs in recruiting, training, and retaining veterans and military spouses, not just for jobs, but for fruitful careers in our firm. Our flagship program of this pillar is our Vet Talent collaboration with Workforce Opportunity Services. Our second pillar of employee engagement focuses on harnessing the passion that exists in our workforce to help veterans and their families through volunteerism. The third pillar, thought leadership, covers our work to understand the issues that veterans and their families face and establishing and sharing best practice programs to address these issues. The fourth pillar is corporate giving. Here we provide financial resources through philanthropy and sponsorship to veteran service organizations and other like-minded organizations to extend our reach beyond what we can do on our own. Finally, our fifth pillar, veterans and military business support, seeks to find the intersection between the work we do with veterans through our corporate social responsibility and the work we do as a financial services firm. Our primary focus here is bringing Prudential's expertise in financial wellness education to the issues that veterans and their families face as they transition to civilian life. Our multifaceted approach to our veteran program is robust and mutually supporting among the 5 pillars. Elements of our WAS program mentioned previously can be found within each of these pillars. Founded in 2005, Workforce Opportunity Services is a leading nonprofit committed to developing untapped talent from underserved and veteran communities through partnerships with organizations dedicated to diversifying their workforce. The WAS model has its roots in a program developed by Dr. Arthur Langer of Columbia University. This program has been adapted and branded Vet Talent at Prudential in 2010 to serve as the basis of our veteran training and hiring activities for post-9/11 veterans. One of the key attributes of the Prudential Vet Talent program is its adaptability to its variety of roles. The multi-phased approach to this program allows the sponsoring company to see the progress of candidates in the program and to assess their readiness at various checkpoints for eventual hire. This program has been used with success in many of our offices around the country, but most recently in our newly established Business and Technology Center in El Paso, Texas. Of the Prudential staff in the El Paso office, more than 50% are veterans or military spouses, the majority of which were sourced using this WAS model. Consistent with our desire to be a national leader in establishing and sharing best practice programs, we tested and refined this WAS Prudential model with the intent of sharing it with other like-minded companies to expand its impact beyond what Prudential could do on its own. As a result, in close cooperation with WAS, this program model has been adopted by over 60 other companies around the country. In support of our efforts to hire and retain veterans and military spouses, Prudential has found it helpful to educate hiring managers on the military in general and the value that veterans and military spouses bring to the workplace. With a very small percentage of our nation's population having a direct connection to military service, there is a lack of knowledge and misconceptions that must be overcome by hiring managers before they will routinely consider them as a viable source for talent. Prudential has developed an in-house training curriculum specifically designed to close this gap in understanding. Private sector programs can effectively be built on governmental initiatives to help advance veterans and military spouse employment. An excellent example of a successful program is the Corporate Fellowship Program of the Hiring Our Heroes organization. Not only does this intern program allow the fellow to begin the acclimation process into corporate America much earlier, but also gives the prospective employer an extended period to judge fit into company culture. These factors play a positive role in job satisfaction and retention. Prudential has created an integrated five-pillar strategy to focus our efforts in education and employment of veterans and military spouses. By adapting an effective model created by Workforce Opportunity Services, Prudential and WAS have created a program that not only has been a key enabler in our own staffing activities, but also in the staffing activities of other companies interested in tapping into this valuable talent pool. Hiring manager training, as well as participation in select government programs, have been a significant factor in the overall success in achieving our mission. Prudential would like to thank the committee for its invitation to speak with you and share our experiences. We stand ready to work with others to help further expand the WAS program or any other that will be beneficial to service members, veterans, and their families. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Savola. Mr. Douthit with Dell, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me today to testify on hiring and retaining veterans in the modern-day workforce. My name is Robert Douthit. I'm the Senior Director for Dell's Customer Solution Centers for the Americas and a 20-year Army veteran serving from 1986 to 2006. I come from the perspective of 5 deployments, 2 combat deployments to Iraq in 1991, Somalia in 1993, peacekeeping deployments to Bosnia in the summer of 1998, peacekeeping deployments into Kosovo in 1999, and commanding an air cavalry squadron in the Anbar province of Iraq from 2003 to 2004. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'd like to start by noting that the U.S. Department of Defense was one of Dell's first customers, and accordingly, we have a long tradition of identifying with and working for the United States military. And we greatly appreciate, as I expect you do, the skills that veterans bring to our workforce and our business. The testimony today has 3 objectives: to explain why Dell is a vigorous recruiter of veterans and their spouses, explain how we recruit veterans and their spouses, and finally offer a few suggestions on how the federal government's Military Transition Assistance Program, or TAPS, would enhance veteran hiring. Dell recruits veterans and their spouses because we believe, as we expect again you do, the military provides a rich source of talent, especially in key areas of worker underrepresentation, and we believe that a diverse workforce is an economically and dynamically effective workforce. A recent study found that when compared to their peers, student veterans using the post-9/11 GI Bill represent the single best source of potential and current achievers in higher education, with nearly 100,000 graduating annually. In 2011, Dell established its Veterans and Supporters Employee Resource Group, or ERG, as a means for veterans within the business to connect, support, and mentor each other. The success of the Veterans ERG is due in large part to the dedicated commitment of our chairman, Michael Dell himself, his senior leadership, management throughout the company, and most importantly, those veterans actively engaged in the ERG. In terms of how we recruit veterans and spouses, we participate in a number of on-base military transition fairs where veterans begin to look for employment outside their military service. Specifically, our Dell Talent Acquisition Team participates in monthly partner calls with the Texas Veterans Commission to identify talent opportunities for businesses seeking workers with those skills that military service and training provides. Additionally, Dell works with a variety of programs and partners, many of which you've heard previously mentioned here today. We also use these organizations as a source of well-trained future Dell team members. My written testimony lists many of those veteran activities and programs that we work with and from which we recruit. At Dell, we also have a social media strategy known as Heroes Among Us. This campaign has reached 6.2 million potential readers. Additionally, on our military's job page, we've seen an over 100% increase in veterans actually tabbing the apply click for a job in the last year. In terms of suggestions for how the government might improve the members' transition experience, as you know, some employers may not understand the many skills that the military service provides or that veterans acquire during their service. And accordingly, those businesses may not understand the value that veterans bring to their specific businesses. Again, my written extended testimony offers suggestions to improve that transition experience. Most of these do not require additional funding. Most notable among those suggestions are invigorating the existing military TAPS program with a curriculum aligned more to career exploration rather than applying for a role and writing a resume, initiating programs that train the civilian, the business, HR, and talent acquisition teams on what the military provides and allowing that talent to actually participate in the TAPS program on base to learn firsthand as that transition occurs prior to the military members' separation. Alternatively, explore the opportunity to permit government TAPS professionals to visit on site with the myriad businesses seeking veteran for their businesses so that those TAPS professionals might learn the inner workings of the businesses looking to hire veterans. Again, it's my honor to appear before you today, and I'd like to thank the committee for your efforts in exploring how we might improve veteran hiring opportunities, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Douthwaite. And again, we appreciate you and your service to our country in the military, and now in service to your brothers and sisters who are veterans, and through your positions in corporate America and at the U.S. Chamber. And I'm going to ask that our chairman, we're honored in this subcommittee to be joined by the chairman of the VA committee, Dr. Phil Rowe, from the great state of Tennessee. Dr. Rowe, Chairman Rowe, we yield as much time as you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to point out, we have 2 Texans in the seat, and it wouldn't be a Texas if it weren't for Tennessee. I just want to point that out before we get started good. We had to bail them out a number of years ago. Yeah, I think, I first of all want to thank all of you all, and I remember very specifically the 2014 hearing we had where Walmart came in here and said, we'll offer any honorably discharged veteran a job. I remember that like it was yesterday, and I appreciate very much your doing that. That meant a lot to, I think, veterans around, and I got on an airplane as we do 3 or 4 times a week, get on an airplane, and it didn't happen during my generation, but now those military young people in uniform can get on the airplane first. I sit in a lot of airports, unfortunately, and it makes me proud as an American to see our country is treating this generation of veterans different than other generations, Vietnam specifically, have been treated. So I want to thank all of your companies for what you're doing and stepping up. You know, one of the things that, there are a couple of things that have been brought up. One was the GI Bill, post 9/11 GI Bill. I used a GI Bill when I got out of the Army in 1975, and I still appreciate my country investing $300 a month in me for 2 years. To this day, I appreciate that. I know that right now the Student Veterans of America have come in and met with us a number of times, and it's over a 70% completion rate for those. It's an amazing statistic. So that is an investment that is paying off big time that you all can leverage. One of the things that then Secretary Shulkin wanted to do is reduce veteran suicide. And General Haston, who is our Guard commander in Tennessee, when he took over in 2011, he had 4 suicides the first 40 days he commanded a Guard in Tennessee. He said we had to do something. And he started a program called Guard Your Buddy. But what he found was relationships and money, finances, were big part of the problem. If you have a job, a good steady job, that takes care of the finances part, and that's part of the issue. I think these young people leaving the military and separating, and that's why I was going to ask Mr. Douthwaite, the TAPS program, the TAP program, I should say, is a good program. But what I found in talking to employers in my district is they don't know how, because we don't have a military base. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, where there was a huge base there. But where they are, they want veterans. They can't find them. And so I think we need to find a way to make it easier for businesses. I had a friend of mine in Nashville who's a CEO of a large healthcare company, said, look, I want to find out how I can hire these young company commanders and bring them into my system. They've already got the leadership skills. They've got all that, the things that I want to help eventually run my hospitals. But he didn't know how to connect it to. And I think that's a key problem that we have, is finding that connection. And where we are, we can't find enough veterans. We look for them, and when they get out, they can get hired in no time at all. So they do bring those great skills to the. So would you have any suggestions? You mentioned a couple, which I thought were very important in your testimony, about how we line up our people. Both, what can we do to the TAP program to make it better? Like you pointed out, a couple of things you can, instead of just learning how to fill out a resume, and how can we line up those great people with the employers out there that want to hire them?
Yeah, I think a couple things. First, we all recognize it's important that the mission of the military is to deter aggression and fight and win our nation's wars, and that's what we're paying.
I thought they told me is to blow up things and kill people. That's what
we want to win, and we understand that's what the young service members and older service members are paid for. That critical time in TAPS towards the very end of their career is essential. That when you bring the businesses together, and again, hopefully the best of the best represented here today who recognize that talent, but that understanding what that transition process is for particularly the younger military members, so that if you can bring business on base into the TAPS program, so that, again, the HR and the talent acquisition members from business understands exactly how that process works, I think you'd find a real fight for talent, right? That they would come in and they understand in one-on-one dialogue with the TAPS professionals around who exactly is coming through the process, not necessarily by name, but by capability and training levels. To your point, those company commanders who can go out and run a store today or lead a sales team. And so that sort of osmosis that occurs between business getting on base or access to the TAPS program, and then conversely allowing TAPS, use Central Texas as an example, to move from Joint Base San Antonio or from Fort Hood into businesses in the region, or El Paso, even in those areas, to understand exactly how do things work at Dell EMC, right? How do things work at those other businesses around the region? And so that sort of permeation during the TAPS program is important.
So I think one of the other things you all are doing for the spouse program is that I was just counting up today in my head, in 2 years I moved 7 times. Most of the tours were unaccompanied, but during my 2 years in the military, that's a lot of moving. And it's very disruptive on families. And the spouse programs that you all are putting in are equally important, because I do think that affects relationships and finances. And so, including those spouses in your program I think is as important as including the veteran themselves, or the active duty person at that point. Makes a lot of sense, because you allow that family economically to be stable. And I want to commend you for that. I think that's a huge thing you're doing. I remember in 2009, during the height of the recession, we had unemployment in veterans. I mean, it was maybe north of 15%. It was horrible. And now I think the unemployment rate for veterans is around 3.4% in the country. So it's very, very low. And part of that were companies like you all that set out and said, we're going to hire veterans. Those companies made it a goal for their company to hire these great people. And I'm sitting here today as a chairman of the committee thanking you for doing that and this effort you're continuing to do to hire veterans. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I have not been able to get Mr. Correa or Mr. Takano to say that the low employment rate has anything to do with tax reform, but I'm going to work on them through this committee. In case you leave early, I just want you to know I'm going to work on them. With that, I yield 5 minutes to my colleague, Mr. O'Rourke. Thank
you, Mr. Chairman. I really like that the chairman of the full committee, Dr. Rowe, referenced the crisis we have in veteran suicide right now, and the conservative estimate, and we don't know the real number, but it is 20 a day. Every day are taking their lives, and the chairman mentioned that finances are part of that, but also we've heard some very powerful testimony from veterans talking about function and purpose. You cannot be more essential or useful than being a member of that military unit. Everything that you do will determine not just your fate, but the fate of those other service members in your unit. And to come back and sometimes not have purpose or function in your life can be very hard to to survive, honestly. And so the programs that we're hearing about today, I think, help to satisfy both of these challenges, both the financial and the challenge in function. And I'm very, very pleased by the example that these organizations have set. And you know, you all have a responsibility to your shareholders, and so you wouldn't just do this because it's the right thing to do, though it is. It's got to be right for you and your bottom line, and it sounds like it is as well. And to any degree you can help us measure or articulate what those measurements are, because you're a good example, and then the example in terms of how it has been profitable for your companies is one that we need other businesses to see and to follow. I really liked the suggestions, Mr. Douthit, that you provided for how we can improve the transition assistance program, just having the literacy amongst employers about what it means to serve when fewer than 1% of America has served post 9/11. It was far more common in World War II, in the Korea era, even in Vietnam, and now it's really the exception. And so I love this idea of bringing the employer into the TAP program so that they can meet those transitioning service members or just gain some competence in the skills and experience and expertise that they can provide to those employers. I like that idea a lot. I also, not lost on me, General Profit, you know, your comment that perhaps to some degree what you and other employers have done has helped to reduce the unemployment rate amongst veterans. And I love the example Walmart is setting for how you treat military spouses. You know, any man or any woman who is in conjunction with their husband or wife serving by helping that family move and survive and thrive in the midst of some challenges that most of us don't experience or know. That's really important, and I would love to see the same kind of return for those military spouses. Ms. O'Brien, you mentioned the unemployment rate is 4 times as high. What are some, to the degree that you, from personal experience or as a representative of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, what are some specific programs, perhaps in line with what Mr. Douthit has suggested, that we can implement for military spouses going forward?
So it's we're unemployed at 4 times the rate of the national average of our civilian counterparts. One glaring omission that exists on the TAP side is that military spouses are they're only able to attend on a space available basis. And so oftentimes military spouses don't have access to the programming and knowledge that's being shared during the TAP process. I think if there is an opportunity to integrate military spouses into the TAP process, it would be unbelievably impactful. Another great opportunity that we're seeing now at Hiring Our Heroes is that states are actually putting delegations together to travel to our transition summit. So as we are convening, you know, several thousand transitioning service members, states, the state of Wisconsin, state of Indiana, they're sending businesses to Fort Bliss, Texas, to try and find folks that want to return home. Right. And capture them and bring them back and let them know that there is opportunity. So I think exploring opportunities for states to integrate businesses into these larger scaled summits is a wonderful opportunity. And also they're going to have the opportunity to interact with military spouses. Starbucks is doing a fantastic job, really one of the leading employers across the country right now. And on Thursday, we're going to make a fantastic initiative announcement at the Spouse Summit where Starbucks, in conjunction with Hiring Our Heroes and a fantastic coalition of companies, is going to work over the next 3 years to hire 100,000 military spouses. And that's going to be, I think, a call to action that our country needs from an employer perspective.
And I'll just say, and I'm sure my colleagues have similar experiences, as we have hired both veterans, military retirees, and military spouses, we've always found that to be extraordinary value for our office. As a representative of Fort Bliss with 32,000 active duty service members, there are a number of military spouses, and the single largest challenge for us to do our part in holding up our end of the bargain is to make sure that those spouses have opportunity in our community. And it can be accreditation, it can be certifications across border, it can be all number of challenges that they face But when we, the employer, find a way to make use of their value, we always get the best end of the deal. And so just from personal experience, I want to make sure that I share that and that we facilitate the really good news that you just announced with other employers and for all military spouses. So thank you for the suggestion, and thank you each for what you do within your organizations, both for retirees, veterans, and spouses as well. Grateful. Mr. Chairman, thanks.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I'm going to yield myself 5 minutes. Someone mentioned that employers don't always recognize or understand the unique skills and experiences that will become an asset for their organization. In your experience, could you highlight, 2 or 3 unique skills based on the experience and training as a active duty military person transitioning as a veteran? Highlight 2 or 3 of those that have become now an asset at Starbucks or Walmart.
Yes, sir. I think, we know at Starbucks that if we looked at a direct skills translation, particularly with our business model, we would not be employing as many veterans, say, outside of some narrow areas, say finance or technology. But since we've broadened and looked at a competency-based model, we've been very successful. And I have one great example. We recently hired a retiring Marine Corps special operator to manage a group of our stores in western Montana. He's responsible for about 10 stores and several hundred employees. And if you look at his experience, he probably wouldn't fit into the Starbucks model. But his ability to lead people, his ability to overcome challenges, his ability to accomplish goals is absolutely fantastic, and he's doing a great job for us. So that's just one example, and I'll turn it over to General Profit to talk about what Walmart's done.
Excellent. General Profit.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would say 3 things. The first thing is the nation makes a huge investment in the knowledge, skills, and abilities of all who serve. And further, an equally huge investment in their growth and development as leaders. But I think the greatest thing that we find in the people who have served and their families is the values-based culture that they bring to our organization. We find that the notion of service and sacrifice and excellence and respect is something that aligns very well with the culture at Walmart and the values that we hold dear, in addition to integrity. And those are exactly the Army values that I lived for 31 years. And I think the Marine Corps and the Navy and the Air Force and the Coast Guard are equally imbued with those same values. And it's important to note that their families and their spouses come with that same values base, and that's the most important thing to us.
Well said. I think we can assume that this probably cuts across all companies in terms of the leadership skills that are sort of ready built into these men and women. What about the challenges? What are the unique challenges that that the veterans come with that you, as an employer and others, should consider and recognize to sort of smooth out any bumps in the transition?
I guess I'll start by saying that, and we've talked around it a little bit here, I think one of the things that I would say about the TAP program that I think could be a huge opportunity is to enhance the opportunity for the private sector and nonprofit organizations to network with these great Americans well before they transition, because most of them have no idea about their career aspirations when they separate. And so it's really hard to have a personal brand kind of discussion with someone who doesn't really know what they want to do. And it's very hard to understand where the gaps exist between that portfolio of preparation and experiences if you don't even really understand their aspirations. And I think if we had an earlier conversation with them, Mr. Chairman, I think we would better understand them, and I think they would better understand us.
Great. Mr. Savola.
Yes, I think we know that we have to work with hiring managers to make sure that they understand the skills and abilities that veterans bring to the workplace. But we've also found that we have to work with the veterans themselves to understand the skills and abilities they bring to the workplace, because many times they believe because you're an infantryman or you're an artilleryman that those skills aren't readily transferable to Prudential. It's true, we don't do a lot of that type of work at Prudential, but certainly the leadership skills and the teamwork and things of that nature are absolutely critically applicable. And we have to educate the veterans as much so they have their own confidence in their own skills.
Mr. Douthit, yes.
If I could add to that, I think the one word that best describes veterans, given all that you've heard here, is athlete. There isn't a lot of fire and maneuver at Prudential, nor is there at Dell EMC. Whether you're a combat MOS or in the logistics IT world, the leadership that's already been alluded to here, and the ability to make decisions under extreme, intense pressure in very short periods of time with grave consequences. I think veterans probably don't quite appreciate how well that is appreciated in the business world with the kind of values that General Prophet alluded to, with the kind of diversity that Mr. Civula mentions as well. So I think athlete is the word I would leave you with.
Well, your comments are timely. Mr. O'Rourke and I and my colleagues have been working on a comprehensive reform of TAP. It's still open, and the ink isn't dry, and we're going to consider everything that you're saying to make it as impactful and as effective as possible. So thanks for your comments. My time is way expired, so I'm going to ask my friend from California, Mr. Takano, to take 5 minutes for questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for everyone, and if you would briefly answer it. Do you include service members in the National Guard and Reserve in your veteran training employment programs? Or is it just for veterans?
No, absolutely. If you have retired, if you have separated as a veteran, if you continue your service in the Guard or the Reserve, or if you're a part of a military family, we equally value you at Walmart.
So Walmart, so you do include service members in the National Guard and Reserves in your program. Great.
At Prudential, we start from a position of this is a talent play. So we look for great talent wherever it exists. So we have a very broad definition of veterans when we execute our program. So members of the Reserves, the National Guards, veteran from active duty are all included, to include military spouses.
Wonderful.
Similar for Starbucks, how we put them in the same standing as retired military or veterans, and we also facilitate, much like my peers here, their military service by giving them special consideration when they are wearing the uniform.
As Dell Farwell, yes.
Wonderful. With the change of the National Guard and Reserves to an operational reserve from a strategic reserve, the Guardsmen and Reservists you employ have been required to attend more training days and increased deployments. Have you noticed an impact from your employees being gone more? I'm talking about this reservist and Guardsman population.
I don't think so, Mr. Takano. We just recently enhanced our military leave of absence policy, actually to include the opportunity for folks who have not served to enlist initially into the military, to remove that final barrier for them. So we, I think, are just very supportive, and we haven't noticed, I think, any uptick in the move from a strategic reserve to an operational one.
At Prudential, there's not been significant impact to our business operations. We stress communication amongst the service members, the reservists, and their management to ensure that as soon as they understand there's going to be a training requirement, that could be worked into business plans. That's worked well for us, so there's not been an appreciable impact that's been detrimental.
For Starbucks, similar to our peers, we haven't noticed an impact for the service members who do deploy. We hold their job and they go right back into their job. And we also have a policy knowing that we don't want them coming from 48, 72, or 96 hours of active drill period right back to work. So we give them a flexible leave policy if they need to take some time off to get back to us.
Yeah, we understand at Dell EMC that that's the cost of freedom and the cost of doing business. and that anecdotally speaking, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army, National Guard that I know will deploy, his job will be waiting for him, and we expect he will do fabulous when he gets back.
Thank you. That is so important to our national defense. I have a reserve base in my district, and part of the challenge is finding employers who understand the various needs of our guardsmen and reservists. Do you know if these service members are advancing at the same rate as their peers? Are these service members retained in the company at the same rate as their peers?
The evidence that we've seen so far is that our veteran associates are more loyal than the average Walmart associate, and that they perform at a higher level. And we think that that's part of the value that you talk about to the business beyond the beyond merely the civic and social responsibility, because once we have a better handle on that, you can monetize those kinds of things, and at Walmart all those numbers are really big.
Wonderful.
I would say, sir, that for our field leader positions where we move veterans and military spouses into them, we've had an absolutely fantastic retention and promotion rate. For our district managers, which typically lead up to 10 stores, we have, at this point, I believe, a 96% retention rate for the veterans that are in those positions.
Great.
At Prudential, I think our retention is commensurate with our other employees. I will tell you that measurement's an area that we're focusing on so we can get better at it. It's a challenge given some privacy rules and things of that nature within our company, but that's an area where we're focusing and working very closely with our HR organization so that we can better answer that question in the future.
Great.
Yeah, I would echo Mr. Civola's comments around privacy in terms of how we measure it, but I can tell you that that veterans are doing very well, but I can't speak to the numbers specifically.
Well, thank you all for your answers. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Takano. Now, my friend, another distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Correa, for 5 minutes.
My good friend from Texas, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, sir. Just wanted to thank all of you for the good work you do, and we've had this challenge when I was in the state of California dealing with Veterans Affairs. We're always trying to figure out how do we give the private sector incentives to do exactly what you're doing, which is to hire more of our veterans. Any thoughts how we can fill this room with good employers that are hiring veterans? What can we do to make your job more effective?
At Hiring Our Heroes, what we know works successfully is when each of our employer partners shares their stories and puts it out there in front of the country. When we show models of success from Dell, from Prudential, from Starbucks, from Walmart, it leaves a lasting impact. And those stories of success for military spouses, we know that through educating and informing hiring managers and recruiters, that it allows us to retain and offer opportunities for military spouses to have career mobility. But really the impact of storytelling, we find over and over again, is what changes the narrative at companies that aren't at the table yet.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that what's important is that we talked earlier about the fact that there is a big divide between the civilian population and the military population, with less than 1% of our population have a direct military service. That means there's a gap in understanding. And getting the word out and telling the stories, as Ms. O'Brien states, is very, very important to help bridge that gap. The talent's there. They're very, very effective. And once employers have a taste of that skill set, there's no incentive needed. It's a talent play that getting them in the door to show what they can do is all you really need to do.
And I would also add to that, Mr. Correa, that the companies at this table and many others around the country are doing a fantastic job of cooperating. The toolkits, the best practices, and coming together on a regular basis to continue to build and refine our practices are happening every day, sir.
Gender, men and women, any thoughts on how to approach women veterans versus male veterans?
Well, I guess we're learning more every day, and some of the work that we're doing and learning from the Women Veterans Network work at Boston University is very insightful for us. We know that there are unique challenges. But frankly, we are finding, we just showcased a Navy helicopter pilot who works in our technology function at Walmart. There are countless stories, as Liz talked about and others have talked about, of those people coming to our organizations and being very successful. I think we have more to learn about our women veteran associates as it has to do with their health and well-being than it does with their education and training or their interest in starting their own business or being a Walmart associate.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I'd like to work with you and these wonderful folks here on trying to figure out how to approach these men and women in uniform before they separate, and double, quadruple the amount of businesses that are actually reaching out to our veterans before the day of separation. And Ms. O'Brien, to all of you here, I like your thoughts about the story, telling the story. I would invite you to come to Southern California so we could do some storytelling to some of the locals, local chambers and other folks to really get, this kind of a process going. As you said, it's really about one-on-one telling folks the success. And again, like the chairman said, I'm very interested in helping you help us come up with good public policy to make sure that people understand what value our veterans are to the private sector. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Correa. If you have any other thought, I think you and I are the only ones here now, so we'll, in case anyone's watching at home, should we name all of our colleagues? No, I'm kidding. I've got one more follow-up question, then we'll close. We talk a lot, Mr. Correa and I, Mr. O'Rourke, and as we work through the various programs within the purview of this subcommittee, and it seems invariably that when we have folks from the VA, we'll ask the question, well, first we'll say, we think it's a great program, we think the mission and the objectives are all good, and if those were achieved, we'd be a better country, our veterans would be better served, taxpayers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we ask, how's it going? And I find it frustrating that we don't get very good, definitive, clear data on what's working and what's not. And all we want to do is find out if it's working, let's double down. If it's not, let's get rid of it or fix it. How do you all, I mean, you're in the private sector, there's a little, there may be a greater sense of urgency and accountability, I suspect. We'd like to take some of that and transfer it to the VA. How do you measure, how do you report to your superiors that what you're doing is actually working? How do you measure, how do you track? What are your metrics? Just give me a couple of examples and then we'll close out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we report quarterly on a very public commitment. Part of it is just the fact that we have an obligation to deliver on our hiring commitment. But increasingly, we are looking at data capture and reporting and analysis on much more quality metrics that are associated with, in our case, how loyal they are to Walmart. And it's beyond the traditional retention notion. It's whether they stay at Walmart or not, do they remain or become productive members of our communities? Do they remain customers? So retention, it's more loyalty than retention, and we are trying to get much, much better at the differences in their performance, whether it be in our academies or our Pathways program, or whether it's in their traditional performance in their operational roles.
Can you ever imagine a scenario where your superiors would ask you for the outcomes of your programs for veterans where you said that you just don't know, you don't have the data?
I would try not to have that experience, and I'd rather not imagine it.
We have that experience like Groundhog Day sometimes.
Yeah, I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, I'm very encouraged with the participation of the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs at convenings like the Bush Institute Military Service Initiative Stand 2 series, which is coming up on its second session this summer, because I think the exchange between the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit organizations has been very healthy, and I think we're learning from each other.
Good. Any other final thoughts on just?
Sir?
Yes.
I would like to say the executive order that was recently dropped by the President in reference to military spouse employment across the government, one of the most important parts that was included in that is that the government will now have to track how many military spouses were interviewed, how the job was advertised to military spouses, how many spouses were hired, and how many were retained. I think that sends a very clear signal to the rest of the country that this is important, it's relevant, and data capture really drives what we're doing.
That's great. Great point.
Yes, sir. I would add that our best measure of success is how quickly we're exceeding our hiring goals for veterans and military spouses and continuing up that bar. But on the qualitative note that my peers talked about, that is the next focus. And we're currently working with the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse to do a deep dive into military spouse employment and understand the numbers behind that so we can give more quantitative answers.
We certainly count the number of hires that we have as a objective measure, but and with our desire to want to be a national leader in terms of programmatic solutions, we report routinely to our chairman about the work that we're doing to help change the game with some of the macro problems, specifically in the area of military spouses and job portability and things of that nature. So we measure ourselves on how we're influencing the workplace and on these larger problems and putting programs in place that others can emulate.
Let me now yield as much time as the gentleman may consume to Mr. Correa.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to point out that when I deal with my veterans in my district, I have a lot of town halls with them, a lot of meetings, and I ask them, what is it that I can do to make your life better? How is it that I can honor you for your years of service to our country? And that's really the way I get ideas, is legislation and issues and what have you. I would like to pose the same kind of question to all of you, which is, what is it that we need to do to make you more effective when it comes to hiring veterans? What is it that we can do to incentivize you, to help you hire our veterans? You're the ones that are doing the hiring, so I would welcome the opportunity to hear from you and to work with you on any suggestions you may have and to implement them. Whether you want to respond to that now or you want to talk to me later on or the chair, but you know, let's talk. Let's work together.
First of all, sir, I will tell you that you don't probably have to incentivize anybody at this table, right, because this is an enlightened self-interest for us. These people are great members of our team, and we want them to join us and stay with us. And I think that the public policy that is already in place has done a lot to make that good for everyone. I will just say one thing that I think is terribly important once again. I do think that the TAPS program is still a little bit too government go alone, and I think the more that you can include the places where these people are going to go to work when they separate, i.e. mostly the private sector and nonprofit organizations as a part of the transition assistance program, I think you will give those young men and women a leap ahead.
Those are the kind of suggestions I want to hear and as we move forward, sir. Thank you.
Sir?
Yes,
I think
Bryant.
we need, everybody at this table, as referenced, is highly committed. How do we get the next level employers to the table to emulate and model what is already in place? And then a big piece that we see over and over again is that companies identify as veteran-friendly. Well, nobody here has ever met a company that's not veteran-friendly.
That's right. That's right.
But how do we get them to move to military family ready so that they are truly ready to welcome the family to the table and provide employment opportunities that have traditionally been reserved for veterans moving forward? So we'd love to see a shift from veteran-friendly to military family-ready.
Thank you very much.
I think there's opportunity. We recognize it. I think all these companies do in terms of, particularly when it comes to spouses, remote work. just because you move doesn't mean you have to lose your job with the company for which you're working, so that if you're able to work remotely and you make businesses aware. Again, to my earlier answer, we recognize having reservists and spouses as the cost of freedom and the price of doing business, and we think that's good business for America. And so offering those opportunities to say, look, just because you are moving every 2 years or every 3.5 years doesn't mean that you're going to lose the services of that employee. Are there things they can do remotely?
And so I'd like to add on to that and focus on military spouses, because one of the challenges that our spouses face is that they're very highly educated and they have occupations that require licensure in individual states. And when they receive those PCS orders, they have challenges moving their profession from state to state. And that's what keeps many of them out of the workforce or delays their success and promotion in their given careers. And there's a number of organizations, HOH, MOAA, and several others are looking at this problem, but it's a tough one. I would suggest that that's one thing that could be examined.
That's actually, Mr. Chair, that's a heck of a suggestion that we can have some kind of a temporary license in a vocational area or something of the sort that would permit you to practice what you're practicing in maybe your home state in a different state, as long as you're, for military purposes, stationed in that new location.
Yes, sir. And bringing that back
100 ways to skin that cat.
There are, and bringing it back to the earlier conversation on mental health, that's one of the biggest needs, and there's so many military spouses who have that expertise, and our entire population and veterans could benefit from their experience and their expertise, but they're having challenges transferring that from state to state.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Correa, and this has been very informative and insightful and encouraging, and you and your companies are to be commended for being leaders in support of our veterans and in just taking advantage of an amazing community of Americans. So congrats and thanks. I want to encourage you to sort of memorialize in more specific way, like Mr. Douthit did, and you're just rattling through a list of recommendations. As I said, we are moving close to a markup, but the ink isn't dry, and I would ask that you look at H.R. 5649. That is our subcommittee's effort to improve the TAP program, but I suspect, I know I've made a few notes, but if you'd look at that, and then you'd give us very specific ways we could consider improving the service to our veterans and helping better prepare them for you all and your companies and the marketplace in general, that would be tremendous. So again, good feedback. If you could do that for us, that would be great. And if you need any help, I know the staff would be happy to guide you there. H.R. 5649. One last moment of personal privilege, because I have a colleague who has worked on this committee for 6 years, I believe. Ms. Kelsey Barron is, it's not like she's not dying, but she is going to the Senate, so it's pretty, anyway, that's a house joke. But in all seriousness, Kelsey has supported me as chairman. This has been a tremendous honor for me, and I'm a new member, so there was a lot of hand-holding and a lot of coaching, and she was very patient with me, and she is the consummate professional. She loves our veterans in this country. Her parents both served, and she is going to be sorely missed, I will tell you. I mean, I like you, John, but you're much better with Kelsey. And so we're going to talk about that later. Kelsey, we love you. We appreciate you. And we're grateful for your service to this committee and to our country. With that, let's close this baby with my final words of I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on today's hearing without objection. So ordered. We are adjourned.